The world is watching, so you'll be aware that the International Court of Justice has ruled in favour of South Africa's case against Israel. They deemed there was enough evidence from South Africa that the case wouldn't be thrown out, and essentially what Israel has been doing is wrong. Now, they don't officially say it's a clear-cut genocide, but that is within the scope. Now, obviously, from what we can see, and based on the statements from the ICJ, it is a genocide. But let's go through the official ruling. The court says it has jurisdiction to rule in the case. The court orders Israel to take measures to prevent acts of genocide in the Gaza Strip and must report back in 1 month. So what I said earlier, the ICJ doesn't say, we rule genocide, but they are saying Israel needs to be mindful to not do that, which is to say, yes, Israel is doing a genocide. Now, this does give the smallest amount of plausible deniability where pro-Israel people will try and spin this and say, see, the ICJ didn't say it was genocide, see? But that's rubbish. It is a genocide. The court says Israel must prevent and punish incitement to genocide in the Strip. The court says Israel must allow humanitarian aid into the Strip. The court obliges Israel to take more measures to protect Palestinians, but does not order it to end military operations in the Strip. There is one really disappointing aspect of the ruling, which I think is really weak from the ICJ, where they don't call for a ceasefire. Now, to try and understand why, I guess the ICJ doesn't want to get in the way of military decisions in a broader sense. Basically, what I mean by that is when Israel does engage in military action, the ICJ wants to make sure that they don't break international law, but they don't necessarily have jurisdiction telling countries whether any sort of military response can be used, which kind of makes sense because in the ruling, it said they didn't call for an end to military operations. That doesn't mean we stop calling for a ceasefire. We absolutely should be still calling for it. But there have already been pro-Israel people using the fact that they haven't called for a ceasefire somehow proves they are right. It doesn't. Now, Al Jazeera summed up South Africa's response to the ruling. We also have the reaction from the South African side, which hails what it calls a decisive victory for the international rule of law. Thanking the ICJ for its swift ruling, the government said it welcomed the provisional measures and said it sincerely hopes Israel would not act to frustrate the application of the court's orders. It further said the ruling marked a significant milestone in the search for justice for the Palestinian people. It added that South Africa will continue to act within global institutions to protect the rights of Palestinians in Gaza. Now, Ledi Pandor, which is South Africa's Minister of International Relations, said that despite the ICJ not calling for a ceasefire, the orders Israel has been given basically admits there should have been one. How do you provide aid and water without a ceasefire? If you read the order, by implication, a ceasefire must happen. That, I think, is very, very true. The ICJ called for humanitarian aid to be sent in. They said that Palestinians must be protected. Well, how can you do any of that when Israel is obliterating Gaza? Look, I think it's a shame that the ICJ hasn't been a bit more clearer because Israel apologists will be playing word games. They will spin and spin in order to justify the actions of Israel. If you pay attention to the ruling, then in effect, it says it's a genocide. And the only logical way of following through with the orders is essentially to have a ceasefire. So they should have just said that. Now, I've already alluded to some people trying to make excuses, but let's see what Netanyahu's response is.
Israel's commitment to international law is unwavering. Equally unwavering is our sacred commitment to continue to defend our country and defend our people. Like every country, Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it. On the eve of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I again pledge as Israel's Prime Minister, never again. Israel will continue to defend itself against Hamas, a genocidal terror organization. On October 7th, Hamas perpetrated the most horrific atrocities against the Jewish people since the Holocaust, and it vows to repeat these atrocities again and again and again. Our war is against Hamas terrorists, not against Palestinian civilians. We will continue to facilitate humanitarian assistance and to do our utmost to keep civilians out of harm's way, even as Hamas uses civilians as human shields. We will continue to do what is necessary to defend our country and defend our people.
What did I say? They will spin this because they don't say the words "it's a genocide." So Netanyahu has actually made it out that the ICJ ruled in their favour, and the idea of genocide is BS because the court said it was, just all but in name. He also said that Israel always adheres to international law. Are you kidding me? We just had a nation, South Africa, take you to international court in which they ruled against you. The blatant lies and deceits from this awful, disgusting person is insanity. I also love how despite evidence being given, and despite the ICJ giving orders to Israel in regards to genocide, ignores that, but is quick to say that Hamas are a genocidal organisation. Well, it's Israel who have been taken to international court, not Hamas. And I'm not defending Hamas, of course not, but them the facts. As soon as the ruling concluded, Israel's national security minister said this on Twitter. Haig Schmeig. Wow, mocking the ICJ within minutes of them saying you are committing a genocide. Yeah, that really affirms what Netanyahu said, that Israel always acts within international law. Now, we have editor of right-wing newspaper The Jewish Chronicle, Stephen Pollard, who said this: grotesque that ICJ relying on UN and UNWRA in its ruling. This whole thing is a foul farce. Yes, the United Nations shouldn't be trusted because clearly they've been infiltrated by Hamas. But he doesn't end there. He also said this and is pretty gross. Anyway, not a single person who isn't happy to see Hamas rape Jewish women will take the least notice of this ruling by the ludicrous ICJ. So let's get back to the real world now. So Pollard claims that international law is a litmus test in whether you support rape or not, where basically he says that you support rape if you think international law is important. He is a genuinely sick, unwell person. We have another corker from Jake Wallace-Simons. The ICJ has not told Israel to cease fire, Sky News reports, but demanded it does everything it can to prevent genocide. But genocide is the intention to wipe out a people, which is obviously not Israel's objective. Seems a nonsensical ruling driven by propaganda. Okay, so evidence is given to the international court that Israel is committing a genocide, and his response is, "Nuh-uh, it's not a genocide, stop it, poopy heads." It's not as if Israeli ministers have been on record to say that they intend to flatten Gaza, or that there are no innocent Palestinians, that they're all terrorists. No, none of them have said that. Now, how have the media responded to this? Well, at the time of recording, the BBC hasn't said anything about it on their Twitter page, which is just astonishing. This is a historical moment. You've got to hand it to South Africa. I mean, they used to be an apartheid state. Now today they are standing up against genocide. That has got to be the best redemption arc. This will put pressure on Israel. Whether that leads to a ceasefire, I'm not sure. But the world knows the crimes of Israel, and the world is watching those who still apologize for them, who apologize for genocide, and history won't be kind to them.